The sound of my body hitting the floor at Christmas dinner wasn't the worst part. It was the silence. 23 people sat around that table, and not one of them moved. No one helped me up. Not even my own mother. My name is Simona Cunningham. I was 29 years old that night, and until then I thought I knew what rock bottom looked like. I was wrong. Rock bottom has a basement and it smells like pine needles, expensive cologne, and betrayal. Christmas Eve at the Cunningham Morrison house was always the same. Matching sweaters nobody wanted to wear, too much food, and tension sitting quietly between plates. Frank Morrison, my stepfather of 10 years, had been drinking since noon. His so-called vintage wine was cheap red poured into a crystal decanter. He was smiling too much, talking too loud, making comments that landed just short of insults. All evening he kept mentioning my seat at the table, calling it prime real estate, saying how some people earn their place in life while others just inherit it. My cousin Jennifer kept looking at me, confused, while I avoided eye contact by staring at the grandfather clock. At exactly 7:47 p.m., the front door burst open and Brittany, my stepsister, walked in 2 hours late with designer shopping bags, even though she'd claimed bankruptcy a month earlier. Frank lit up instantly. He stood, walked over to me, pointed at my chair and said, "My real daughter needs a proper seat at this table." I didn't even have time to react. He grabbed my chair while I was still sitting in it. I tried to stand, my leg caught the tablecloth. The chair slid, and I went down hard. My hips slammed into the floor, my dress tore, and cranberry sauce flew across the table. And still no one moved. My grandmother gasped softly. My uncle pulled out his phone and started recording, and my mother stared straight ahead like nothing had happened. As I struggled up, Frank muttered that I should be grateful I was even invited. That's when I noticed his phone, unlocked and face up on the kitchen counter. In corporate compliance, we call that an opportunity. I left that night bruised, humiliated, and shaking, but I also left with photos of every message on Frank's phone and my father's old laptop hidden in my car. Frank thought he'd pushed around a nobody. He didn't realize how closely I'd been watching for years. Frank entered our lives after my father died, finding my grieving mother at a church support group. What looked like fate was really a predator spotting weakness. The favoritism started early. Brittany got a brand new car at 18. I got a bus pass and a lecture about independence. I laughed back then. I didn't know better. My father had left education funds for me, but when I tried to access them, they were gone. Frank blamed market volatility, while paying tens of thousands for Brittany's private art degree, which she later abandoned. My mother slowly disappeared, becoming an echo of whatever Frank wanted. Worst of all, the family business my father built ended up under Frank's control. He sat in my father's chair like he'd earned it. But I noticed things, missing money, strange transfers, patterns that matched Brittany's endless failures. I started keeping copies. Last Thanksgiving, my grandmother slipped me a USB drive and whispered that my father's old laptop held things Frank never wanted me to see. That Christmas night, ice on my hip and anger in my chest, I finally opened it. The password was my birthday. Inside was the real will, the one that protected everything and proved Frank was never meant to own any of it. His phone messages filled in the rest. Shell companies, fake loans, hidden accounts, debts to dangerous people, and clear fraud. I spent the night writing calm, professional emails, scheduled to send at 3 a.m. to business partners, investigators, creditors, and finally my mother. By sunrise, Frank's world was collapsing. Phones rang nonstop. Partners panicked. Creditors closed in. Frank tried to flip the story with lawsuits and interviews, claiming I'd fabricated evidence, but the truth kept surfacing. Former victims came forward. Witnesses flipped. Recordings emerged. By the time the FBI moved in, Frank had nowhere left to hide. The man who pushed me to the floor at Christmas dinner was arrested in his pajamas. His assets were frozen, his lies exposed, and his carefully built image destroyed. The business returned to me exactly as my father intended. A year later, our family gathered again, this time without fear or silence. My mother apologized, truly this time, and my grandmother raised a glass and said we had learned what silence costs. Frank is now serving decades in federal prison. The man who needed to dominate every room now sits forgotten in a cell. He pushed me down in front of everyone, thinking I was weak. What he really did was push the first domino in his own destruction.